Even though I'm really tired, I'm doing chapter 23 because I didn't yesterday and I really should have finished this whole thing. So, burying bones. The bandages came off evilly enough, revealing the results of several days' worth of treatments. I barely noticed. Not bad, Dr. Triage muttered to himself as he brushed a hoof across a newly exposed section of my chest. Skin's healed up nicely, and the fur's already growing back. Remarkable. Diamond dogs are quite resilient, yes? Quite an interesting bone structure. The marrow is denser, resulting in heavier mass, and yet somehow thrice as many times durable as an earth pony bone. Perhaps something to do with the high metal diet, yes? There we are. I blankly nodded from where I was propped up on the bed, arms still bound to the sides. My chest looked very smooth and pale under all that fur. A small coating uh, of silky hairs was beginning to cover what had been burned away. I was somewhat unnerved to discover that I seemed to have 2 extra pairs of nipples. The lack of fur covering myself had revealed them at regular intervals down my chest. I felt strangely embarrassed about that, although nothing was ever said about it. Triage was a pale yellow earth pony. He had no mane that I could see, as the top of his head was covered in a surgical bandana emblazoned with a red cross, and somehow he was extremely adept with his hooves, despite an obvious lack of fingers. "Well, everything checks out fine so far," Triage was saying. "Tomorrow I'll be coming back to get those tanks off you," he said, jerking his head at the tubes. "Try to take it easy. You might have strong bones, but they are by no means fireproof, of all things," he snorted. "The regrowth solution was put to the test, my furry friend. Bones are hard to regenerate, so you should be feeling very weak until treatments are done." With that, the good doctor left the infirmary. I glanced down at the tanks and the warped appendages contained within. We had to remove them. My mind is still having trouble wrapping itself around it. What do I do now? I need to do something! My thought process blanks. My subconscious takes the helm. I hunch myself over and furiously begin to bite through the metal holding me down. The weird bread-like taste filled my mouth as I wrenched a good chunk away and chewed it to pieces, the metal somehow softening in my mouth into a manageable texture. I swallowed it hungrily. Be it some biological adaptation or magic, I wasn't complaining. Ginger, still sleeping in the bed next to me, stirred. I paused, counting out the seconds. "She did this to you." "Shut up. You've been nobody to blame but yourself. You asked for it." I shook my head and cleared away the argument. Doesn't matter, anyway. Once I reached 15, her breathing resumed a regular pattern. I grunted to myself and continued gnawing away. Abruptly, my left arm broke free, still encased in its tube. I moved the limb around, wincing as the muscles were used for the first time in days. I held it up to my face for a closer look, peering into the murky blue substances that was contained within. The burns, too serious. The flesh from my elbow, down all the way to the tips of my fingers, was patchy and mottled. It was heavy scar tissue, looking more the cooling lava one finds pouring from the Hawaiian volcano, known as Mauna Loa. I frowned at this. No fur growing back over that. A few attempts at flexing my paws were somewhat fruitful. I still felt very sluggish, but I couldn't move my fingers at least. With a sigh, I continued on to the other arm, freeing that one with more ease than the first. The small meal reminded me of how hungry I was, voracious even. Hunger was no stranger to me. I could bear it with ease. I had, after all, lived like a hermit contentedly alone in my rainy city. The rule was, if I didn't need it, I didn't buy it. I was such a practical bastard. No, what had driven me from the rest was the soft hiss of rain coming from outside. The weather has that effect on me. I was consumed almost unbearable urge to feel it on my skin, to spatter off my nose and drip off my tail. Being cooped up and bedridden had left me feeling dirty. On top of that, I felt broken. I had to do something. A complete success. Besides, full recovery if you play your cards right. However, I wasn't supposed to be up for another day or so. I had literally been bound to my bed, and if caught up and about, I assumed that I'd be put right back. That was the reason I had to be sly about this. He'll just sneak out, stand in the rain for a few moments, and get back in. I thought to myself, what could possibly go wrong? Don't you dare finish that sentence. Close one. You can thank me later. With catastrophe averted, I swung myself out of the bed and settled on my hind legs. My two other limbs were surrounded with glass tubes and were usable for walking. Thankfully, I was no stranger to being bipedal. I wriggled my toes on the floor and unlocked my rear claws. They sank into the surface with ease before I sheathed them. At least those work, right? There was some kind of magical reaction. A window was above my head. It would do for a suitable escape route. I approached it and awkwardly attempted to unlock it using my mouth, as my fingers were incapacitated. The stubborn lock defied me, however. Not to be defeated, I determined that I'd have to use my lower digits. Carefully maneuvering myself so that my back was facing the window, I planted my tube-encased forearms on the floor and warily heaved myself into a handstand, using my legs to walk my lower half up to the window until my right paw was in striking distance of the lock. My arms shook from the effort but held. You don't sound smart. With a great deal of concentration, the lock finally clicked open. I returned to my rear paws and slowly nudged the window open, casting another wary glance at the sleeping form of Ginger. The sleeping mare rolled over, dead to the world. She breathed something into the mattress, something I couldn't hear. A contented smile came over her face, and one of her real eggs kicked a little. I missed you, too. I gritted my teeth as a surge of guilt knotted my stomach. I left her to enjoy her dream. She deserved some happiness, at the very least, 'cause Cloud9 died. So sad. Sometime later, I found myself sitting on the small hill out behind the barracks. The grass was cool on my fur, and the rain was refreshing as well. It was warm, a real tropical downpour. It went pip-pap-pip across my shoulders, and tink-tonk-tink on the tubes. It sounded like a musical instrument in its own way. It was so peaceful out here. It's just me, the ground, and the cloudy sky. You'll catch pneumonia. The rain tasted fresh, pure, unsullied by taint of any kind. It was a rare thing to enjoy water of this quality where I'd lived before. City water tasted unpleasantly like metal, as it would taste to a human, and the rain that often fell there had to fall through the smog and other fumes. Here, you could probably drink puddle water straight from a sinkhole in a graveyard, and it'd still taste like something melted off a mountain glacier. I could see no ponies outside. The steady rain had driven most indoors, it seemed. I wondered if this storm was natural or pony-produced. Wethoof had a curious relationship with the weather. They lacked enough Pegasi to force the local weather to their will, so usually they just shaped what they had, augmenting or weakening the incoming wild cloud banks as they saw fit. In the distance, through the haze of falling water, I could see that the great wall encircling the town had begun to be demolished. The western side had vanished, and I could see an enormous pile of lumber stacked by the northern watchtower. Wethoof was returning to the way it had been, back to when the rainforest grew right to the edge of the town. If the glimpses I'd seen in Ginger's memory were accurate. Curiously, though, I could see more ships than had been there before. Moored to the watchtower at different heights were 5 ships now. The 2 newcomers were smaller than the mighty benevolent Mercy and her sleek daughters. These were rounder, fatter ships, with ornamented envelopes, and no noticeable gun ports. Traders, I assumed. With all the valuable lumber suddenly available, it was no surprise that a few enterprising captains had risked the wild southern skies for a rich hold of rainforest wood. Things were looking up for Wetooth indeed. The battle would have to put this place on the map. Tourists would come to stop and gawk at the skeletons of the hydras, much like how humans pondered over the bones of dinosaurs, 65 years dead and still capturing imaginations today. Tink, tonk, tink. How close I had become to becoming a fossil myself. How very close indeed. I shuddered. The tubes. I glanced down at them again. A well of frustration surged forth. The pale skin within seemed to glow white. Such was its contrast to the murky liquid. I mentally stomped a foot down onto the uprising emotions. No! Keep calm, I reminded myself. You haven't earned that right. The wellspring ignored me. It pushed back hard. Arriving in Equestria, a new body, the stresses of battle, the strain I'd put myself through to maintain my sanguine facade, and now this! It all caught up to me, and I came to the very edge of blowing the lid off my mental cap. A tiny stream spurted out from beneath the foot. So great was the pressure. Just a little, but enough. Crash! Faster than I thought possible, my arm swung up, smashing the two glass tubes together in an almighty explosion of glass and liquid. My paws, my arms, they tingled in the air, with a funny sort of sensation. It was almost painful how sensitive the skin was. Heavy scarring covered every inch from the elbows down. No fur. The fingertips were round and smooth. The familiar black nubs of material were gone, as if never existed. No claws, just gone. They looked hideous. I closed my eyes and buried my paws into the ground by my sides. Even the dirt felt funny. The tide of anger receded back to the depths, back where it belonged. I stuffed it down to the bottom of a black chest and padlocked the thing with wrought iron chains. I'd never clumbed this close before. Ever. A gentleman never loses his temper. Stiff upper lip, and all that. A blip of motion out of the corner of my eyes registered through the haze of weather. The air pulsed as a pair of wings flapped and again enfolded. I didn't need to turn. I realized with some surprise I needed to identify her. The scent was comfortingly familiar. Even her breath, a tinge raspy, but always steady, was recognizable. Hey! Glad to see you're finally awake! Daring Do trotted over next to me and sat down by my side, wings stretched outwards, catching the downpour on dusky tan feathers that seemed to turn light brown with moisture. I watched as the water pitter-pattered off her pith helmet. For a while, we lay just like that, side by side, soaking in the rain. I was in no hurry to do much of anything, and it wasn't like I could carry a conversation at the time. Daring broke the ambience of the storm. They're looking for you, you know. She glanced at me with concern. I nodded. You'll come back with me, then? I gave another nod. There was a pause. I watched the stormy clouds for a while, blinking rapidly whenever a drop hit my eyes. I've sort of always wondered why you like weather like this so much, she said eventually. I think I can see it now. This is like washing yourself off, isn't it? Except it's not dirt you're cleaning. I deeply sighed, and nodded again. You know, it's funny. About 2 months ago, I was relaxing in my treehouse, not a care in the world, besides which ruin I'm going to hit next. And then you come along, and everything gets turned upside down. Now I'm poised to begin the greatest expedition in living memory. Well, except for the princess, I guessed. She flopped onto her back, looking up at the sky. Can you imagine it? We're going to see everything. One last great adventure, to beat all others. My ears perked up at her, indicating my surprise at this. She laughed. Well, yeah, I'm not exactly getting any younger, Echo. She flicked a hoof through her mane, black and silver and gray. And this journey is going to take a long, long time. By the time we finish, I figure I'll be too old to do much else. I'll retire somewhere. An island, maybe. Yeah, I could buy an island. She trailed off, lost in thought. Daring Do? Getting old? The notion seemed preposterous, and yet there is some truth. She's been at this for over a decade after all. Nobody's golden years last forever. I'd never asked her how old she was. A gentleman never asks a lady, and a lady never tells. But for a pony, I'd put her around middle-aged. That doesn't bother me in the slightest, though. I'd always gotten along more with the mature women. Ugh. Can I see them? The question was so blunt that I was momentarily confused. Your paws. I saw them when you were on the table. Well, what was left of them? Daring winced. And seeing how they're completely destroyed by the tanks, why not? How you've completely destroyed the tanks, why not? Say, how did you get out of bed anyway? I thought those things were bolted to the sides. I gave a half-hearted, wolfish grin to the clouds, flashing my teeth. She laughed. That figures. So, can I see him? I hesitated, unwilling to show her. Oh, pfft, she chuckled softly. I'm no spring filly. I've seen plenty in my days. You've got nothing to be ashamed of. Show me, please. Very slowly, I pulled my paws out of the ground and held them up. Daring gave a low whistle. I could see her eyes widen in shock at the sight. Abashed, I quickly tucked them to my sides and rolled away. Immediately, a hoof planted itself on my shoulder and rolled me right back over. I looked up into the magenta eyes, gazing up at me with a flat expression, as if to say, Seriously? You did not just do that. You know better. I sheepishly had out my paws again. The rain by this time had cleared away the salve and the dirt. Daring looked at them again, with wide eyes. What I missed last time, though, is that there was no fear or disgust in them. Only curiosity. How do they feel? She asked softly. She pressed one with a hoof. I flinch at the touch, still sensitive, but hold it where it is. I rolled my wrist and deftly clenched a fist. Better, huh? She pushed my fingers around, studying how the joints moved and flexed. I weakly nodded, leaning back into the ground and closing my eyes. You're a very silly diamond dog, Echo, she finally sighed. She was right, of course. She always is right. Remember that, fellows. Woman, even when they're wrong, they're still right. Or else. Daring stood up and shook out her feathers. Come on, we should get out of the rain. I brought some gems back from the treehouse today. You feel like some sapphires? She half sings it. My stomach rumbled, and I sat up immediately, tail thumping to the ground. Ha! Let's go, big guy. Nom nom nom. I stuffed another pawful of gems in my mouth, furiously crunching and tasting and even trying to swallow, all at the same time. I constantly kept choking. I was eating so fast, but I didn't really care at that point. So great was my hunger. And where exactly did you find him? Ginger asked, reiterating that question, running through the minds of every pony present in the infirmary. Daring shrugged. Out back, enjoying the weather. But it's raining. I stupidly grinned from where I was sitting on my cot and pointed a finger in the air. Exactly! A couple half-chewed sapphires fell out of my mouth, which I awkwardly stuffed back to where they belonged. Captain Tithus rubbed a face with a hoof. We had several teams covering the entire town, and he was behind the barracks the whole time? Apparently, Ginger muttered. She's been cleared of her own bandages, and is set to leave the infirmary. Dr. Treage looks extremely miffed. It's a good thing you brought him back, Miss Dew. We can't finish treatments without a patient. Very expensive treatments, with expensive equipment. Damn it! I knew 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 it! He pointedly glared at me. I gave him the finger and continued to contentedly eat. I don't think he wants it, Doc, said Daring. I nodded vigorously. What? But Treage sputtered. I could not allow this. As a medical officer, it is my duty to care for the wounded guard. Echo's not in the guard anymore. His debt's been paid. Tithus gave me a wink. If he wants to abandon treatment, that's his choice. I returned his wink. But before you leave, I have a few things to debrief on you. I'll be in my office. You'll be free to leave Wethoof on the morrow, pending some paperwork. Treage, if you'll come with me, I believe your services are needed elsewhere. The captain struck a crisp salute and trotted out. Treage grumbled something under his breath and followed him. Ginger awkwardly stomped her hooves on the ground in the silence that follows. So, she began, there's service tonight, a memorial at the Western Wall, or where it used to be. I'll be in it, so she trailed off. Dalen grinned at her maliciously. What was that, sweetie? Sorry, can't hear you over the sound of poor social skills. Ginger scowled. That was mean, daring. I seized into a fit of silent snickering. Would you please come with me? I can't do this alone. It came out in a single blurt. Ginger actually looked ashamed that she said it. Anything for a friend, Daring said as she turns back to the mare. Oh, friendship is magic. Ginger looked taken aback for a moment, then nodded in confirmation, accompanied by a nervous swallow. Without another word, she left. Daring made to leave as well. You should go and see the captain now. I'll be getting some things together at the inn. Head over when everything is wrapped up. Okay? I nodded again, and glanced down to the stuff, another popple of sapphires into my mouth. So good! When I looked up again, she's right in front of me. Daring leans forward and pecks me on the cheek before spinning around and sashaying away. Her tail flicked the tip of my nose. She looked back and winks at me. Try not to take too long. The doors closed behind her. Never before has the sound of squeaky hinges graced my ear in such a beautiful manner. Whump. I fell off the edge of the bed, completely paralyzed. Except for my mouth, which is stretched into the biggest smile I've ever worn. Sounds like Wally. Remember when she kisses him in space and you get it. He's all electricity thinged. I've always believed in saving judgment for a rainy day, Typhus said, as he reclined in his chair. We were in his office. The stallion bust in the corner was outfitted with his armor again, several new dents and scrapes shining brilliantly on the otherwise immaculately polished metal hide. And wouldn't you know, it's raining today. I shuffled awkwardly from where I sat across the desk. He grinned at me. Relax, Echo. Now, on behalf of Wethoof and the Equestrian Guard, I'd like to thank you for your services. It was no small feat what you or your comrades accomplished. That deserves a reward, don't you think? My eyes followed him as he trotted over to his cot and reached under it, removing a large canvas bundle. The stallion telekinetically moved it to the desk, where it drops with a loud muffled clatter. Open it, he ordered. This is from Bellows and I, as well as Mayor Baritone. Mayor? I looked at him with surprise. Ah, yes, I've forgotten. You've been out for a few days. Wethoof had an election immediately after our battle. Our mutual acquaintance seemed to be very popular. Baritone was pleasantly surprised, to say the least. Time will tell to see if he can lead, though. I have to admit, he's got some big horseshoes to fill. He rubbed his chin thoughtfully. So does Sparky, for that matter. I implored him to continue with my paw. Once again, I noticed how freaky it looked and awkwardly shoved my paws out of sight. I've chosen her as my replacement. Typhus opened up a drawer in his desk and pulled out a scroll and waved it around a little. A broken seal was on it, similar to the one I'd seen him open before. Princess Celestia herself has ordered that a small garrison will be stationed in Wethoof full-time. Something like the Hydras will never happen again around here, and seeing as I was pulled out of retirement for this, he sighed wistfully, a replacement is needed for when I leave. I'll be decommissioned again when I return to Canterlot for a debriefing. I did get a promotion out of it, though. I'll be hanging my armor as Major Typhus at least. Ah, but where was I? Open the bag, please. I untied the knot around the top and dumped the contents out onto the desk with a clatter. Whoa. I lifted up the first object. It looked like a modified version of a duster, of a dark green, but minus a collar. Instead, a wide hood was stitched onto place. There were no sleeves, true to Diamond Dog fashion tastes. I tossed it on, and threw the hood up. My ears smoothly slipped through pre-cut slits. I patted the sides, admiring the thick, tough, but soft texture. There's even a hole for my tail to poke through. Swag. You like it? Spider silk. Bellows whipped it up when he heard about your toga and armor getting incinerated. Typhus finished, a bit lamely. There's more from him, too. He pushed a few more things towards me. More armor, but only bracers. A thick strip of spider silk, a light brown. It goes around my waist over the duster robe like a crosshair sash. My bracers slide on smoothly. They were made of thick dark metal that had been hammered and compressed 100 times over. I looked at them for a long while, for an unknown reason. I'm glad that's all the armor there is. Still, they leave an unpleasant sensation on my scarred forearms. I took them off and slid them into some pockets in the duster. Tithus coughed politely, snapping out of my brooding. Mayor Baritone has left his reward outside of Miss Dew's temporary residence, as we'd nowhere else to put it. I expect you'll see it when you depart. Now, on to another pressing matter. He reached under his desk again and pulled out a familiar object. The black gem shimmered weirdly, seeming sucking up all the light it touches. Tithus holds it in one hoof. Do you know what this is? He asked. I shook my head, warily watching the shadow crystal as if it might explode. He sighed. That makes two of us, then. I'll be presenting this to the princess in my report. I'm sure she'll know what to do with it. He put the gem away. It's been an honor serving with you, Echo. He saluted. Unwilling to have my paws put so close to my face, I chose to respectfully bow instead. It's bigger on the inside. Sweet Celestia. It was about the length of a large pickup truck. 6 wide wooden wheels, 3 aside, gleam with brass finishing, resting easily on the wooden decks of Wethoof. The artfully painted compass rose on the side leaves, little doubt to its purpose. It reminds me of the great and powerful Trixie's stagecoach, but that hunk of junk pales in comparison to this beast. A monstrous wagon, really, but to me, it might as well be a motherfucking Bugatti. And it's bigger on the inside. Did I mention that? And I opened the door and peered inside at the dimensional impossibility. The interior is as large as common room, longer lengthwise than widthwise. There are even small rooms along the walls, 3 aside. 3 aside. More than enough for all of us. In the middle, several cushions are scattered around a metal fire pit. The small grating in the ceiling assures that any smoke will be well ventilated. Everything smells like fresh wood and adventure. Gods, I love that smell. Daring shared my excitement. Would you look at this thing? She explained, as she poked her head around my side. This is unbelievable. We'll be traveling in style. Where did Tithus and Baritone even find time to build this? I shrugged, still in a daze from seeing it the first time. Oh, you know, with a little help from a few talented, helpers, Disaray's voice said, as one of the cushions exploded into a shower of feathers, revealing the figure of a stormy gray alicorn. I believe my cousins supplied a helping hoof in the matter. Consider it a gift for all your assistance in the battle. He pointed a hoof at one of the doors. Also, dibs on that room. Daring's eyebrows shot up. You came back! I haven't seen you for days! Disarray rolled his eyes. Of course I came back. I always come back. Something wrong with that? I'm like a bad fart in an elevator. You just can't get rid of me. He rubbed his chin absently with a hoof. Also, my handsome body might be a bit fertile, force of nature, but I do need a place to rest my weary head every now and then. Seeing as I'm more or less your acting mascot, I might as well have this room. He trotted over to the door he chose and opened it, looking inside for a moment before turning back to us. I'm thinking of installing a bunk bed. There'll be so much room for activities. He laughed in delight, clopping his hooves together. Oh, as long as we're choosing rooms. Daring moved off to investigate another door, leaving me and Disarray alone. The hybrid collapsed into a cushion and spread his hooves at me. Welcome back, Fluffy. It's good to see you up and about. I expect you're still feeling a little down in the dumps after losing your claws. I hid my paws in the duster. He chuckled at me. My, how the mighty have fallen. Tell you what, though, I can give them back to you, in a way. My ears pricked up. In a way? I was at his side in a heartbeat. He chuckled again and reached inside his robe before pulling out a strange object, about 6 to 8 inches long, black and somewhat curved. Along one side, I can see the ambient light reflected off a razor-sharp edge. He hoofed it to me, somewhat gingerly. This is the only claw that wasn't destroyed by the fire. Disarray said. "I suppose the loss is somewhat my fault, you see. Thanks to the fact that your claws contain my raw magical essence, they reacted quite chaotically to the magical fire that our local hothead threw at you. Ironically, if they hadn't been charged in that way, they'd have survived." He snorted to himself. "I've reabsorbed the essence that was left in this one, as I was in great need of some spare power after the battle, so it's not much use now, except for a sharp edge." I held the claw in my right paw. "It's the weirdest feeling in the world, holding a detached piece of yourself. Imagine having your leg cut off, being presented with the bones that were in a few days later." "Yeah, pretty much like that." Somewhat nauseated, I slid the claw into my sash and left Disarray there. Anxious to distract myself, I took another walk around the outside, examining it closely. In the front, there's a seat, much like for a driver of carriage. The whole apparatus for the harness is there. Even reins, for some reason. This would have to be pulled, but it looks different. The harness doesn't look like it will fit a pony correctly, even one with the muscular stature of Coconut, who was currently trying to put it on. "Oi, what's the deal? The collar won't fit," he grumbled, straining to get himself into a curious harness that looks like a cross between Big Macintosh's work collar and a backpack with straps over the shoulders and around the stomach. I helped him out of it and wriggled out from underneath. "It's not supposed to fit you," Ginger put in from where she was resting on the porch of the tavern. "It's supposed to fit him." She pointed a hoof at me. "Wait, what?" Coconut scratched his head. "A wagon that ain't pony-powered? That just doesn't make sense." Ginger stretched and laid her head in her forelegs. "I recognize the type of harness. The Green Claws used ones like that to haul carts of gems. Have Echo try it on if you don't believe me." I immediately found my bodily thrown in position, and Coconut threw the contraption over my neck. Surprisingly, it fits. Snug, too. "Well, I'll be a monkey's uncle. Try pulling it." He moved back a couple of paces to watch, looking at me expectantly. "What's going on out here?" Daring Do asked, as she lit onto the driver's seat of the stagecoach. She must have finished inspecting the interior. "Echo's going to prove me right, that's what," Ginger grumbled from the porch. Disarray popped into existence a few feet away from Coconut, who jumped away in surprise. "Hey, Daring," he called. "Nice ride. Take it off any sweet jumps?" Daring ignored the jibe. "Well, he is going to be pulling. Might as well get a feel for it before we leave." Daring tapped her chin thoughtfully. "But don't strain yourself. You won't be back up to full strength for a while, and we've got nothing but time to kill. I mean, we could get a regular collar for Coconut to use, in the meantime." Coconut puffed out his chest and tried to look very poorly heroic. "It'd be my pleasure to give it a shot. A stallion's gotta do what a stallion's gotta do." On the porch, Ginger stifled a snicker. Stifled. I looked back at the huge stagecoach in disbelief. I still felt weak and frail. And they expect me to pull this hulking beast? Maybe when I recover. Daring Do looked at me expectantly from her perch in the seat. "Ah, hell. Might as well be a good sport and give it a shot." With a grunt, I threw myself forward into the harness. The leads tightened behind me. My rear claws dug into the wooden decking of the platform. The whole thing creaked and jerked forward several feet, but then I ran out of steam and staggered to a halt, wheezing loudly. The Coconut stepped up and pried the harness off me. "Not bad, mate. Not bad at all. Guess I'll be filling in while you get your back on your hooves." "Back on your hooves. Paws. My bad." He clapped me on the back. I winced and rubbed where his hoof landed, still breathing hard, and somewhat ashamed of my weakness. Daring hopped off the stagecoach, barely making a noise as she gracefully landed on the deck. "Well, with that settled, I propose that we leave in 3 days. We've got supplies to pack, and Echo needs to decide where our first stop will be." "That," Ginger said, "and we have some respects to pay tonight." One of the Benevolent Mercy's former escorts floated serenely over the assembly. She'd been repainted with dark reds and browns, and great slabs of armor, plating haphazardly, having been bolted to her hull, turning it into an equestrian version of an ironclad. The envelope had been emblazoned with the symbol of a black winged sword on a blood-red field. At the bridge, the newly dubbed Captain Griffin, the Griffin could be seen barking orders to the crew of his new vessel. The ship, renamed the Possibility, shuddered as gun ports opened up on one side and gleaming, oversized cannons sticking their noses high into the sky. "Still can't believe he's got a bucking ship, for Celestia's sake," a nearby guard whispered, stopping his hoof. "They're pirates, and Tithus gives them the ship!" "Oh, that was the triple thingy." "Oh, don't be complaining," another one said. "Without them, the town's ponies would have been whisked away to who knows where, and the old mare would be doing who knows what to them. Besides, I heard they're bound for Griffin skies, in the far north, away from Equestria. Good riddance, I say. Let them deal with the pirates." Daring Do, sitting next to me. See, they're not pirates, they're mercenaries, right? Whatever. Daring Do, sitting next to me on the fledging grass, shushed them into silence. Coconut, on her far side, chuckled softly. The night was warm and humid, but a stiff breeze, coming up from the west, kept the crowd refreshed. The guard was out in full force, as well as the entire population of the town. I took another glance around at my surroundings, still unable to believe how fast the area has changed. This was the site of where the western wall once stood, where the hydras broke against the mighty wooden barricade and its surrounding embankments. The earthworks themselves are still there, already a young coat of grass growing over the scene. The three massive craters blown out into the gauntlet were filled with the bodies of slain hydras and covered with the dirt. The decomposition of the corpses will help the fuel recovery of the rainforest as the behemoths return to their nutrients to the earth. Wait. The decomposition of the corpses will help fuel the recovery of the rainforest as the behemoths return to their nutrients to the earth. Okay. Major Tithus stood on a wide raised platform, flanked by the newly promoted Captain Sparky, the newly elected Mayor Baritone, the Alicorns Borealis and his sister Australis, and standing off to the side, Ginger Snap. Tithus just began a speech in memory of those who had fallen in the battle, and the ponies who were taken in the early days of the struggle, before the wall was raised. I hardly paid attention. It's funny how things always work in cycles. You're born, you live, you die, you rot, you're born again as trees, flowers, plants, other animals. The circle of life. Hakuna Matata, I thought to myself. I've never feared death. That doesn't mean I didn't want to die, mind you, but when time's come, and it comes to us all, I won't be troubled by it. The hereafter beckons with the promise of eternity. But, in a small way, I think, nothing really ever dies. Elements, the substance of the universe, which erupted forth from the genesis of existence and continued to be forged in the roaring hearts of stars, made as small as particles. At the atomic level, you never really die. In fact, every atom in your body could have been part of another creature at one point, and in every other animal before. In fact, your body may contain particles that have been traveling from being to being for millions of years. You might even have pieces of the planet inside of you, a drop of water that traveled from an Antarctic glacier, a pinch of iron that found its way from the mountains of Japan. We're exactly the same, I conclude, at the most fundamental level. Every last one of us. Just arrangements of matter, forming and reforming as the cosmos continues its voyage down the river of time. Does that make this insignificant? I ask myself. Does anything matter if we're still all just stardust in the galactic winds? Absolutely. Our substance might be eternal, but the life binding it together is not. That alone makes it significant. Life is significant. Fighting, breathing, screaming, heaving, fucking, laughing, killing, thinking, and living. I like how it's in the middle there. All the good, all the bad, and all the struggling. Worth every goddamn moment of it. I glanced down at my mangled forelimbs and grimaced. It's just so hard to remember that sometimes. Meanwhile, finish the story already! Tithus wrapped up his speech to thunderous applause. Without further ado, I present the Duke and Duchess Aurora, who have volunteered to assist our own Ginger Snap with the last rites. He moved back to the mayor and captain. Duke and Duchess, huh? So that's what the titles are. My eyebrows rose. Oh, interesting. My eyebrows rose up in surprise at this, and the two dark alicorns stepped gracefully forward, standing on either side of Ginger. The mare had a stony face that would make a mountain's mother scold it for not being mountainy enough. The crowd's applause waned off, soon replaced by an expectant hush. Ginger seemed nonplussed by the awaiting crowd, slowly placed her goggles over her eyes. Her horn glowed for a second before a pale wisp of green light floated off the tip and rocketed into the sky. At her sides, Borealis and Aurora extended their powerful wings in one snap, so swiftly that a gust of wind can be seen caressing manes and fluttering helmet bristles for 100 feet into the crowd. In the sky, I hear Griffin scream a command. The possibility guns gleamed into the starlight. At my side, Daring covers her head with her wings. "Plug your ears!" I heard the muffled voice from underneath the feathers. I let out a breath I didn't realize I was holding. Kaboom! The airborne 21 gun salute shattered the stillness of the night, soon replaced by a low, soothing hum that permeates the air. The ground, even my bones, seem to rattle along with it. It takes me a moment to realize what's going on. Singing. The ponies all around begin to sing. There are no words, only a deep throbbing harmony of voices. The Gallicorns flapped into the night, and began to slowly circle the gathering, the wingtips barely skimming the ears of some of the audience. From the darkness of the feathers, color began to stain the black sky. A soft aurora took shape, a gentle tornado of all known colors spiraling upwards towards the heaven, a swirling vortex of ether and smoke. The melody changed. The stallions began a mournful chorus, rumbling and seemingly making the air tremble. The mares rose up into a haunting scale that made my hackles rise. Daring added her voice to the ghostly choir, her usually rough tongue smoother than cream and softer than silk. It's undoubtedly the single most beautiful thing I've ever heard in my life. Her eyes were fixated on the sky, and her wings were ruffled by her sides. I watched as Ginger's horde began to light up along the spiraling grooves, her mane rustling soft against the breeze like a rough flames. Then she arched her back and reared skyward in a smooth motion, a stream of fire erupting into the empty space surrounding the aurora. The song increased in volume. The bass thunders and makes the earth tremble. It sounds like pure grief, yet restrained and tethered by stoicism. I felt like the sound is preventing itself from doing any more, holding itself back. The treble waited and crooned as though the moon was cracked in half. The notes spiderwebbed through the air, a sad scale of raw emotion. Ginger whipped her head back and forth, and the lance of fire whirls about, swirling and shaping. I watched in disbelief as the emerald fireball assumed the form of a massive pony, slowly plodding through the sky, tethered by a thin cord of light to Ginger's horn. Her goggles reflected the light weirdly, making her look almost like she had eyes of pure, colorful light. One of the guards next to me began to cry, even as she sang. He sang. Borealis and Australis continued to slowly bank around the gathering, trailing the colors of distant skies. Their voices, like musical instruments in their own right, joined the herd with benevolent serenity. The fireball shifted again, this time becoming a unicorn, a mare. She danced through the sky, through the pulsing air. The morning hymn went through another soul-crushing melody. It felt like my heart was about to crumble from sheer sadness. I gasped and clutched my chest, falling backward onto my haunches. A proud Pegasus stallion rose from the flickers of the now vanishing unicorn like a phoenix and spread wings of pure flame. I could feel the warmth even from here. The fire changed again, almost alive, into an earth pony, whose paws the imaginary ground, before proudly rearing a mane of rippling light fluttering against the colorful backdrop. Then it hit me. These are the dead. No, that's gonna take forever. I felt weak. I toppled over onto my side as the song rose and fell around me as waves in the ocean, before managing to roll onto my back. They're saying goodbye. This is the last time they'll walk among us. Oh. The emotion was overwhelming. I dug my wart fingers into the ground as I braced a surge of grief, so powerful that it makes me shake. Unbelievably, I opened my mouth to try to sing as well, though it sounds that issue forth are strangled and hoarse. It doesn't matter, as long as I can add anything to this. I felt something wet on my face. I didn't dare reach up and wipe it away. Instead, going through another series of silent convulsions. I'm crying? No. Gentlemen don't cry. We don't show weakness. I don't show weakness. Stiff upper lip and all that. But maybe just this once. Something pressed onto my chest, wrapping around me tight. It's daring, singing her heart out as she slowly rocked me back and forth, her head pressed up against my neck, as I shook with another wave of tears. Of grief. Tears of her own were freely running down her face, although her eyes were tightly closed. Unable to fight the sound, the Kellers, the magic, my dam breaks for the first time in years. I wrapped my arms around her and squeezed her tight, just grateful for something to hold on to. Or some pony. Above, the fiery specters presented themselves one last time to their loved ones before they fade away into the aurora. Stallions, mares, unicorns, pegasi, earth ponies, even a small filly graces the sky with her presence. Each one distinctively unique, each one a terrible loss. But finally, the music began to die in a whisper, many of the shivers having broken down onto their own. The last pony left singing was the cinnamon-coated unicorn mare, with a fiery mane and black goggles covering her pretty green eyes. Streaks lined her face as tears leaked out from under her eyewear, but she kept on singing until she came to the final member of the dead. A Pegasus of soft green fire, flying beautiful acrobatics in the sky, came down to land beside the unicorn. Ginger's horn finally sparked out. She's done. The magical tether to the flaming spectre shimmered away, but the mare remained for a split second more. A soft kiss shared with her beloved. Aww. They broke apart, and Ginger finally collapsed in grief. The Pegasus snuggled her gently before fading away into the night. 3 days later, we're ready to go. End of chapter 23. And god damn, I swear to God, this author is just... Because this author had his fanfiction pretty successful, so I think he's just like extending the ending as far as he can. Because even though there's a lot of interesting stuff, it gets really boring. And it's, well, not boring, but, well, no, it's boring. Yes, and there's a whole nother chapter after this. And then there's the epilogue. And I'm like, ugh! Ugh! God! Ugh! Ugh!